We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better.
So a lot of people were completely jaw-dropped by seeing that, and it's going viral on Twitter. But this is due to the fact that a lot of people don't like to read Marxist literature. And this is also due to the fact that Marxist literature likes to use a lot of jargon. The words they use have different meaning than what you expect them to have. Kind of like when you say defense force, it can also mean a military that's doing an aggression. But it is called a defense force, so you kind of can see why the jargon is there in order to confuse people. So what exactly does Marxist think about the way kids should be raised? Well, a big branch of neo-Marxism, which is studied in academia, has to do with colonial studies. And colonial studies feature the concept of decolonization. So decolonization doesn't mean what you actually think it means. It means that Europe and America and Western capitalism specifically is suffering from whiteness. Now, the word whiteness doesn't mean what you think it means. Because, for example, Japan and South Korea also suffer from whiteness, despite the fact that there are not many white people there. Now, the solution to whiteness is to replace it with color group collectivism. And of course, color group collectivism doesn't mean what you think it means, has nothing to do with color, is just a different way of doing things. And when you look at the label, you will see that white individualism, in other words, Western capitalism, creates individuals that are capable of taking care of themselves, that are rational beings, capable of making their own decisions. Meanwhile, color group collectivism creates individuals that obey. They follow orders. They listen to the boss. They respect authority. They don't think very much and are very good workers. So, for example, if you look at the fostering independence and individual achievement, this is what capitalism promotes. The focus is on the child as an individual. There is an emphasis on taking care of yourself and your needs. So this needs to be replaced, that the child is now part of the family. The emphasis is on helping others, considering their needs, or how you need to affect others. Meaning that the child is discouraged to think for themselves and is encouraged of always seeking help from the community. He needs to ask the community what he should think, what he should do in any situation, and many times he should actually give away what is good for him and what is good for the community. Now, as you can imagine, the community is never brought together in order to have a conversation. There is a speaker for the community, a speaker which is in a position of excellent privilege, and in such a system you would want to be the person speaking on behalf of the community so that you can get access to a lot of perks and you can manipulate people in order to do your bidding. Then we move forward to how people should think. Promoting cognitive development through exposure to physical object independent of social context. This is how things are being done under Western capitalism. Children are encouraged to play with toys and investigate the world by themselves. Children learn to think about the physical world separately from the social or interpersonal world. This is exactly like my mother raised me. In other words, my mother allowed me to go play outside. At the time, there were no cell phones. There was no way of my mom contacting me or knowing what I do when I'm outside. So, obviously, I was exposed to a lot of danger as I was going outside and playing by myself more than 4 hours without any parental supervision, doing anything that I wanted. And sure, sometimes I did get injured. Sometimes I managed to trip and fall. Sometimes I managed to even break an ankle. Well, I learned a lot from those lessons. I was getting self-taught. I realized that, well, maybe I should tie my shoelaces so I don't trip. Or maybe I should avoid running too fast. That is how Western capitalism teaches kids, allowing them to explore the world. Sure, there is danger. Sure, they might get hurt, but they learn from that experience. This is not the way that academics want children to learn the world. The way they want to learn the world is that children remain with the parents more, often not just in proximity, but touching. The physical world has meaning largely as it relates to human relationship. In other words, the child needs to be under constant supervision, constant pampering, not allowing them to become independent, not allowing them to figure things out by themselves. The parent is God. The parent says something, and what the parent says, children needs to obey. Now, of course, some of you might say, well, hold on a little bit. Isn't this antithetical? Like, isn't this putting a lot of emphasis on the parent? Isn't this actually a better system than what we have? Well, I will point you to point number 5, where it says exactly what the video you watched in the beginning was saying. Teachers have a special role to teach academics and inoculate morals. The teacher is the second mother. Parent role is to socialize children and respect teacher's authority. And this is the crux, this is the center of exactly the cultural upheaval which is happening in the United States right now, where the teachers are outraged that they realize that the parents are having enough. And they view the rise of the parents as some terrorists that are rising and telling teachers that they're not in charge of the children. And they find this absolutely unacceptable because they have been indoctrinated into this ideology. And when a teacher says that parents are white supremacists, this is exactly what they are talking about. They're not talking about white supremacy with the KKK and all of that. No, it has nothing to do with that. They're talking about Western capitalism, which is something they want to overthrow. Why do they want to overthrow it? Because they want more power and wealth. They want that privilege. They want to be in the position where they get to be the community speaker. They want the authority. They want the prestige. They want all of that. And this is why they advocate for this particular ideology. I was told in a previous Twitter conversation that the left, being more intelligent, is advocating for this because they are smarter people and they know what's good for everyone. In reality, it is actually good for the leftist. If you are a teacher, in this system, you get a lot of prestige, social recognition, and wealth. In this system, you can actually be ousted if you're not meritocratic, if you don't teach kids math good enough. All of a sudden, this system doesn't benefit you if you're a teacher. This is why, in the United States, overwhelmingly teachers are left-leaning because they want this system. They want the power and the privilege that stems from it. Furthermore, the idea that the parent role is to socialize the children, you notice the hierarchy. You notice that while, yes, the child has to stay with the parent almost all the time and hold hands and listen to the parent like the parent is God, at the end of the day, the parent is not more powerful than the teacher. The teacher indoctrinates the parent, who then passes it on to the student. And of course, the teacher is under the government. So this is a system that creates people who obey. It gets people to think the way the people in charge want you to think. It is not a system that encourages creativity. It is not a system that encourages free thinking. It is not a system that empowers you as an individual to be the master of your life. And of course, you know, some weak individuals, people that like to be told what to do, people that do not usually succeed in a meritocratic society will want this type of system. But notice how disingenuous the terms are. In other words, if you advocate for this system, you're a white supremacist. But if you advocate for this system, you're a person of color, which is completely ridiculous considering that there are a lot of people of color who advocate for this system. And you can see this now in the United States when a lot of parents are fed up with what's being done in schools. A lot of them are also left-leaning people, and many of them are also people of color, because this has nothing to do with race. It's just a different way of thinking. It's just a different way of organizing a society. And you will notice in the world, dictatorships, regardless of their color or their race, for example, in Romania, under socialism, this way of thinking was heavily encouraged. This is exactly how Nazi Germany also encouraged, like you see in the beginning of the video, that children don't belong to the parents, they belong to the community. If anyone studies a little bit of history from Nazi Germany, you'll see that they had a lot of programs that happened after school, like the Hitler Youth, in order to make sure that the children are separated from their parents as long as possible, and they would be subverted with versions of children need to benefit from freedom and liberty, but it was freedom from parental guidance, liberty from parental guidance, and dedicate their life in order to serve the fatherland. It was exactly the same with Soviet Russia. There is no wonder that they used to call it the motherland or the fatherland. Like that was the second parent, the government, the state. That was the one on top. And of course, just because you can have the individualist way of thinking doesn't mean that the state doesn't exist, or doesn't mean that you shouldn't be patriotic. But what it means is that it recognizes that human beings are competitive by nature, like you want more than your neighbor has. But at the same time, human beings are also collaborating by nature. But the difference is that the collaboration within the first way of thinking is voluntarily. You choose to collaborate because it's in your own interest. And then the government has to figure out how to show to the people that what it's doing is within their own interest. And when the government does something that's not in the interest of the people, then the people get upset. In this way of thinking, the government is God. Everything that the government does needs to be respected. And at the end of the day, every person needs to do what is in the government's interest, even if it's not within their own interest. So I hope you managed to understand a little bit why this way of thinking, that the teacher is actually more superior to the parent and that the children belong to the community. It is a Marxist thought. It's been done in China during the Mao Cultural Revolution. You will notice that in many authoritarian nations, the thinking is the same. It is the thinking of the dictators, and it is the thinking of the totalitarians. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.